All right, I'm recording the meeting.
Good evening. This is the January 19th joint meeting between the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance to discuss the proposed budget for next year. And we welcome the Board of Finance and look forward to this discussion. I think that probably the best way to start this meeting would be to have Paul just update the Board of Finance on where things stand, and then Mike would turn it over to you and your team to ask any questions of us.
Sounds good.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you, Mr. Sands. So I know that the Board of Finance members are aware we made the budget binders available to all of you some time ago, and 8 days ago tonight we presented this overall budget, this administrative draft of the budget, to the Board of Education and to the community. Since that time, the Board of Ed has had one deliberative meeting where they met with the leadership team in public to further discuss this draft as it was delivered to them. Rather than go through the entire presentation for all of you, just to hit the highlights, this budget is built upon existing vision and mission in the Guilford school system. It is built upon some established priorities that the board has worked towards for years now, around an overall healthy and safe social, emotional, as well as physical climate, around a professional learning environment, and around a rigorous learning environment. Additionally, it's built this year around 3 initiatives that really focus on the realities of where we are, maintaining health protocols in the schools for students who are attending in person, really working to master the challenges of a blended learning environment for students who are learning through our schools, whether that is in person or full-time from home or some combination of the two, and continuing to work towards an environment and instructional practices that further equity and social justice in our schools. It is built upon a projected enrollment next year that looks to be 111 students fewer than we have enrolled in our schools today. I noted for the board and for the community that we look at that projection with a grain of salt. We do anticipate that that is inflated as a result of the pandemic that we're experiencing. We budgeted for 12 full kindergarten sections this year, and we have only enrolled 11. We do anticipate there might be a bounce, a bubble in kindergarten enrollments next year. Additionally, while on a normal year, we track about 26 students who are Guilford residents, but learning at home and in homeschooling. This year, we have more like 75 students in homeschooling, many of whom have indicated that they do plan on returning to the schools. So that decline of 111 might actually be more like 50 if we see a rebound in those 2 areas. All of that being said, this budget is built on 2 other assumptions. One, it's the most conservative budget that the leadership team has ever presented in draft form to the Board of Education. We recognize that this pandemic has not only been a health emergency, but has been a financial emergency as well, and we are bringing forward a very conservative budget. We do not feel that this budget does harm. It maintains class sizes, it will meet the needs of students, but it is certainly conservative, and it is aware of the financial impacts that this pandemic has had on our community. And finally, and this is really important to note, the budget was built on the assumption that vaccine rollout will allow us to return to a school system next year that will be normal in many of the ways that impact the budget. We did build a budget that was designed for full 5-day schedules, normal school hours, full classes. Again, we're not increasing class sizes, but neither are we continuing to work with the decreased class sizes that we put into place this year around social distancing. I want to note that because should that not pan out, then this budget as designed might not be enough to meet the needs. If next year faces the same realities that we faced this year, This board knows that we may be coming to you this year because of a shortfall in this budget. So we just want to make sure that we name that. This budget doesn't include COVID contingencies. It therefore means that if we require additional resources because vaccine rollout doesn't get us to essentially normal with masks next year, that there could be additional unanticipated expenses that we don't address in this budget. All that being said, therefore, we're bringing forward a budget this year that initially requests $62,447,051. That is an increase over the current budget of $918,592, or a percent increase of 1.49% over the current year's operating budget. I again want to note that that is the most conservative budget that this leadership team has ever delivered to the Board of Ed. Now, it's not the lowest budget we've ever finished on, but it's the lowest draft that we've ever brought forward as a starting point. It is built on a very positive salary number. You know that the bulk of our budget is built into salaries. The salary line in this budget increase is approximately 1.5%. It is built on very positive medical benefits. You'll see that our medical spending is decreasing again this year, leaving us spending below the 14-15 level in the medical area. Additionally, it's built on really positive experiences that we have seen in special education. The tuition line is projected to increase by about 1.1%. There's a lot of positives in this budget that move us in a good direction. There are some staffing reductions in this budget. This budget does include the reduction of 2 teaching positions at the elementary level. One of those is unfilled currently. It's that kindergarten section that we did not fill this year. The second one is a natural decrease in enrollment as a large 4th grade moves up into Baldwin. We do not, again, those 2 reductions are in response to enrollment declines. They do not increase class sizes. It also includes 2 reductions in staffing at Adams, in math and in the music staffing at Adams. Again, those are in response to declining enrollment. We do not expect that those will have significant impacts on the quality of the program that we provide. Those are in response to enrollment declines. Over the last 4 years, Adams has declined approximately 30% in its enrollment. It's the point right now of those enrollment declines. There are some additions. We are adding, or we're requesting the addition of a school social worker at the high school level, because we know that we continue to need to meet students' social and emotional needs. It includes the addition of a partial position to add American Sign Language as a world language at the high school level. It includes the addition of a second district-wide technology integration specialist. These are certified teachers. We had one in the budget at the beginning of this year. We've since added a second. These are specialists who help teachers to incorporate technology into their teaching. Obviously, that was a significant need this year. We anticipate that it's going to continue to be a need. We include that position in our budget moving forward as well. And then it's got some interesting positions, or interesting other enhancements built into it. The budget does include $25,000 targeted towards a family equity liaison, an individual in the system who would work about 10 hours a week, who would be available to students or families who identify in marginalized groups, and somebody that they could reach out to help them to advocate or function as a liaison with the school principals on behalf of their students. It includes exactly $35,000 for a residency program in collaboration with other districts around the state. This would be an opportunity to expand the diversity of the teaching force in Connecticut. It would allow us to allow an aspiring teacher of color to work in the system next year, draw salary while working, complete 18 credits of coursework, and secure certification in the state of Connecticut. Again, we would be just one of many districts across the state working in that collaboration. It additionally includes some additional funds directed towards both the boys and the girls swim team. It would afford for us to have a local hosted Guilford boys swim team. Right now we work as part of a cooperative, and we've heard an interest in swimming over the last several years from our community. And while it doesn't include additional funds, It does look at the elementary level to increase art contact, as we've heard a desire in the community for the last 3 years now to increase opportunities for art contact at the elementary level. There is a cost associated with that. It's not an increase in staffing, but it involves a commensurate reduction in the world language contact time at the elementary levels. It's a shift in focus. Those are the highlights of the budget. There's much more in there and a lot more specific in the budget books that you've received, as well as in the PowerPoint presentation. But we know that this conversation is going to be most effective for all of you if we answer your questions. And so I don't want to spend any more time doing presentation, but would be happy to answer any of those questions that you might have.
The big one.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Ken, did you want to start?
Yeah, I'd like Paul to elaborate a bit more on the COVID assumptions, or the kind of hold on those assumptions right now. It seems obvious that we're going to face some financial impact from the COVID in the new school year. Are we assuming that this whole thing is on hold until we get progress in the vaccine front and progress in the funding from the new administration and from the state administration?
So I appreciate the question, Mr. Gammon. A lot of that sort of straddles both this budget year as well as the next year, focusing on how we built the budget in response. Although there's been a slowdown in what we are anticipating for vaccine rollout to school workers, we're now anticipating that we should see our workforce being vaccinated probably in mid to late February, early March, that we'll see our workforce vaccinated. Obviously, it'll be sometime before we see students in the schools vaccinated, but as we get more vaccine out into our community and into our schools in general, we're anticipating that we will likely be opening next year and continuing to have plexiglass dividers and continuing to wear masks. But the budget was built on the idea that many of the other unbudgeted costs would end up being relaxed. For instance, this year, we brought on additional custodial staffing. We brought on additional nurses' aides. We've brought on additional substitutes at all of the building levels. We anticipate that we brought on additional teaching FTEs at the high school to make sure that we were reducing class sizes so that we could maintain social distance. We're anticipating that with the vaccine rollout, even though we might still be wearing masks and behind plexiglass dividers, that all of those additional positions will be able to be released. So this budget doesn't build in all of those additional costs into next year's budget. Now, this year's budget doesn't have any of those costs built in either. We are at the same time watching what those unbudgeted expenses do to our bottom line and then offsetting that. We know that we received about $600,000 in the first CARES allocation. We know that we're working wherever we can to make sure that we're finding FEMA offsets for expenses. There's an additional second round of aid. We don't know what that's going to look like. Our latest information is that that will be rolled out on the title formula, but we'll see dollars hopefully from that rolling out. We know that last year we underspent our budget, and we know that those aren't dollars that are technically available to us this year, but we'll continue to remind you that we returned about $330,000 unspent at the end of last year to the general fund. Next year, again, this budget is not being built with all of those additional positions built in or with a COVID contingency for those positions. We're building it on normal, and if we end up needing to make those expenditures, we would end up having to see where we could offset them and then come back to the Board of Finance for an additional appropriation to cover the delta, as we will likely need to do this year. You know, all of those offsets will likely not match the shortfall this year. It'll go a long way to mitigate it, but whatever is left as a delta, we will need to come back to you, whether it's in March or April or May, and identify what that shortfall will be and request a special appropriation. This year's budget wasn't built with a COVID contingency, and neither is next year's.
Thank you.
A lot of the other expenses that were made this year were around supplies and materials, and many of those will carry over. We're not going to see a repeat of tent expenses or plexiglass expenses. So many of those were one-time purchases, and if there is a shortfall next year, to the degree that some of that was equipment or material, much of that has been purchased. The PPE may be a renewable cost, but a lot of the other stuff would be a one-time cost. Staffing would be the most significant additional cost if we decided we needed to increase staffing next year.
Right. It makes a lot of sense to try to go back to normal on this budget based on what we're hearing. Ultimately, we don't know, but I appreciate the fact that you prefaced this budget with that indication that the intent is to go back at least in the fall with a full program back in school. Usually when we meet, we kind of jump all over the place. So I was trying to figure out if there's somewhat of a better way of going through all the questions. But I know I, like the rest of the board, have many pages tabbed or marked up. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just start asking some questions that I have. I will say that on behalf of me only, I haven't talked to anyone else on the board. I was pleasantly surprised at the conservative number that was put forth. I know the Board of Education needs to get a hold of this and do their due diligence as well. But it's very much appreciated with the times that we're in, that it's at 1.5. And very simply, you look at the salaries at 1.51 and an increase of 1.49, everything else washes. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that's done with a lot of work by the district team and leadership and everyone else involved in this budget. So it's very much appreciated. And I wish the Board of Education well as they go through and they deliberate this. A couple of very quick questions I have. Usually I don't think we get historical enrollment data. We just get the 2021 year from the previous year, the enrollment. I'm assuming in your presentations that historical data will be presented in enrollment, right? I think it typically is.
Yes, yeah, we've got there's a PowerPoint. For comparison
purposes.
There's a PowerPoint slide available on the website that shows the historical data back. We are down over 400 students since the 15-16 school year. We know that we've started to see that decline. It may not be as severe as in some other similarly situated communities, but we're beginning to experience that.
Great. I also noticed I don't believe it was high school. I'm looking at the tabs under the summary by location. I noticed what I believe is a new column under enrollment, which is per pupil. Is that a new column where there's a number? And I believe that's probably, from what I could tell, it's a dollar amount per pupil for that particular line item. Is that a new column or no?
It may be new in the documents we've shared with you. It's something that we've used internally, especially at the elementary level, where we've got 4 schools rather than 1 at each level. So no, that's a number that we've used internally. I'm not sure if we've shared it with you before.
I think we have.
I don't recall it, but you might have. But it's actually very helpful to see that column and see where some of the per pupil expenditures are for just those particular line items. Some of them are $1 and some of them 52, or I'm just randomly turning the pages, and it's helpful, I think, to see that.
Linda, were you going to comment there?
Yeah, the only one that doesn't have that is the high school, because it doesn't apply. But we've had this on our schedules for a long time. I just decided to include them for everybody because others have said it was helpful.
Yeah,
I have a question about substitute teachers.
Go ahead, Ken.
I believe, and I think we've got it in the meeting that follows this. I think we've got meetings after meetings that follow meetings in the next 2 days. But when you were trying to cover the staffing problem this year, I think at one point I read that you were replacing, adding substitutes by getting non-certified people to fill the vacuum, and perhaps upperclassmen who were training in education in the colleges to come and fill that void. I wondered how well that was going, because I see that in the substitute teachers line, you've added, it's modest, but you've added $15,000 to that, which means that, does that assume that you'll be carrying over a lot of these other people that you brought in an emergency way? Or are you going back to the more traditional sources of substitution?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that play into that. We bring on at every building what we call permanent subs. So we know that there's going to be a certain expectation of substitutes at every school. And we have, building subs that they report every day, Monday through Friday, and they're there because we know we've got that need. And it allows them to be people who get to know the school and the teachers and the students. Right off the bat, what we did this year is we doubled the number of daily subs because we knew that we were going to have an impact on the availability of subs. In regular years, we have struggled to be able to find daily subs as we need them, and that's not unique to Guilford. That's a condition spread across the state. This year, with COVID and with the blended learning model that's happening, that has been exacerbated. We've got teachers who are being impacted by quarantining, and in many ways, the blended learning model, we have found ourselves in situations where even when a teacher, some of our teachers have been moved into the condition where they're working from home. So the teacher is under quarantine, but is meeting their students through platforms like this one and continuing to deliver instruction from home to a student body, some of whom are home and some of whom are in school, but therefore still requiring a second person to be able to provide the physical supervision for those students who are in school and in a classroom with a teacher who's only appearing on a smart board, only being projected in. I have seen the principals providing that coverage on multiple occasions as well. What the state provided this year because of that shortage of substitutes across the state is that the state waived the requirement for a bachelor's degree in order to be cleared as a substitute. And so we put out a call for our Guilford residents who may be juniors or seniors in the college level, particularly those who have an interest in or are pursuing education. Mr. Bowden has been meeting with them, and we've brought on around a dozen new substitutes who may be juniors or seniors in college and pursuing an educational career. In most cases, those new substitutes are being placed at the elementary or middle level. We may make an exception for a senior who's about to become certified in mathematics and is really looking for an opportunity to have a high school mathematics teaching experience, particularly in those cases if we've got a teacher who is in fact working from home and they become the second person in the classroom. It actually becomes a really good learning opportunity for those young people in that situation. So we have been able to some degree mitigate that substitute shortage by bringing in those individuals. We don't know if the state is going to continue that waiver next year. And if we weren't faced with the difficulty of finding people to fill substitute roles, I'm not sure if we would locally continue to use people without a bachelor's degree if we didn't have a need to do so. So that remains an open question. The building subs are exactly what I was referring to when we talked about those unbudgeted COVID positions, the additional custodians, the additional nurses' aides, and those additional daily subs. The cost of that doubling of the building sub has not been built into next year's budget. We plan on returning to the pre-COVID levels of permanent building subs and then continuing to work with the substitutes as needed. There's an increase in the line item because we've also continued to see the need for substitutes, and we're considering the need to increase the daily rate to help us to address the shortage that we experience. That was a long answer.
I think that's really the key on the substitutes, is that the going rate has gone up because of this shortage, and it's not clear that it'll go back down next year.
All the local districts are competing with each other to pull in the same limited number of daily subs.
Dr. Friedman, I would like to ask you about some line items that are increasing and to try to maybe dive in a little bit and understand what's driving them.
Sure.
Okay, so there's a few of them, but I guess one that came up right away was the telephone and internet seems to be increasing pretty significantly. I think there was a figure of 17% increase at the high school and maybe overall like a 23% increase.
I'm going to need to defer to Linda on this, but I believe a significant portion of that expense is that we needed to run hard connections to both of the middle schools, right? And so we've got increasing wiring costs. Linda, can you answer more fully what the costs are related to those lines?
Right, so we have, Adams and Baldwin have the increased cost because of the new lines, so that we have better internet connections at those schools. And the high school is result of the actual costs that we're incurring for their internet, because we used to get the internet for the high school for free, and now we have to pay for it, and it's been more than we've anticipated. So it's the actual cost of the high school and then the added to for Adams and Baldwin.
We were getting it for free through a grant that has been discontinued.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like we're making improvements for bandwidth, with this new virtual environment.
We needed to make the corrections. The high school was already in a solid hardwired condition. The elementary schools were able to meet the demand, but at the two middle schools, we couldn't meet the demand without a hardwire solution.
Does that decrease if we go back to a more traditional model where students are on site?
I don't believe so, because I don't think that we're going to go back in and pull out the wiring, and I believe that there's going to be a continued reliance on this hybrid model. It'll be different, but we've learned a lot through this experience, and there's pieces that we're going to want to hold on to. We're already in conversations with some neighboring districts about continuing to use the hybrid model to cross-seat kids across high schools. We're going to have students who continue to require supports at home. We're even looking at it as a possibility of a way to expand the school day for students who receive special services, whether or not we couldn't provide some of those services after the school hour ends by continuing to rely on Zoom and other similar platforms. I don't see it as an improvement that we'd put in and then pull out if the pandemic got us back to primarily in-person instruction.
Okay, I have a few more to go through, but I could take some turns if you want.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if anybody else. Bob, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, a couple. Dr. Freeman, good evening. Just a couple of things that you anticipate in our daily interactions when people are asked. I anticipate questions that people may ask me about. So I'd like to be able to understand, to tell them the role of an additional social worker. How many people do they serve? What is the role, the benefit? How does it, and I'm sure the benefit goes beyond them to other teachers and whatever. Please walk us through that a little more.
Sure. Without Mr. Scanziano here, I won't be able to give you the actual student ratio, but I can have that for you the next time that we talk. What I can tell you is that across the school system, we employ school counselors, what we all referred to as guidance counselors when we went to school. We have school social workers, and we have school psychologists. We employ these folks across the school system, and they work with our students in a number of ways. They work at the elementary level, going proactively into classrooms to deal with things like stranger safety and internet safety and general well-being. They work with students on an as-need basis, where students who find themselves experiencing anxiety or stress or depression have people who can respond to some of those concerns in real time at the school level, rather than needing to work with outside contractors or see somebody outside of school. Social workers additionally will include family supports as part of what they provide. And while it's often not part of the official job description, you'll see that there are supports for the classroom teachers that are built into that as well. I mean, it is part of the official job description in that they work with classroom teachers in designing modifications and accommodations so that students who are struggling with social, emotional, mental health can be supported and feel comfortable in the classroom. But this year particularly, we're seeing that these folks are offering supports to our staff members because of the stress and the anxiety that we're all bringing into the building with us as we report to work. We've been working on building those numbers for some time now. And as you look back across how student enrollment has declined and staff staff numbers haven't sort of paralleled that decline exactly. In large number, that's because you're seeing that the need for positions like this one increasing. So at the high school, those folks are dealing with everything from college applications and enrollments to an alternative high school that we offer that meets until 4:30 in the afternoon, to all of the interventions that I just mentioned, as well as an in-house therapeutic program that particularly targets the needs of students who have school anxieties. And so in this environment, the opportunity to bring on one more FTE in that area to support all of those needs is probably limited. We targeted the high school, but I would imagine that if we were looking at adding money to this budget, you'd see need for those mental health positions. I could make an argument that we could put 3 of those positions in and support this work at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. I will note that when the board meets with the leadership team, this is one of the areas that gets discussed the most frequently. Pre-COVID, we knew that we were seeing more students and younger students who were coming to school more often dealing with things like stress and anxiety and depression and school avoidance behaviors, things that you used to only identify at the high school level that we're now addressing pretty regularly, even at the elementary level. So again, it's an important addition. I can have those more specific numbers for you, and I just apologize that right now I don't have the total count or the student ratios, but I can have those for you next time we all meet.
Great, thank you. And then the other one was about swim team. I was at the public meeting where there were single-digit requests for it, and the response has been so strong that I think there must be more than that behind it. And is this the moment to, you know, and what is the difference between regional and what we're doing, what we propose now? And is this the moment to expect the kids will be in and out of locker rooms and the like?
Yeah, so there are 2 conversations that are happening with the swim teams. One is that we do have a local girls swim team, and it's a standalone Guilford High School girls swim team. And that program, while it is still relatively new, is not fully funded by the board budget. Now, it's not the only program not to be fully funded. Ice hockey is not fully funded. The crew program is not fully funded. But that program only runs because of parent contributions that are made every year, primarily around the cost associated with pool time, but also to offset some other costs. When we first brought that program on, the board, in fact, was only funding the cost of the coach, and parent contributions were covering the cost of pool time and transportation and official expenses. The request on that side is to bring down the portion that is paid for through parent contributions, to absorb more of that cost. And in fact, one of the most recent communications I saw was saying, please just cover the cost of the coach and the transportation and the officials like you do for most other programs, and that there was an understanding that parent contributions might need to continue to cover the pool time. The boys' request is substantially different. The boys have for some time now only had a swim team as part of a cooperative. And that is where the boys are swimming as part of a combined team that is currently hosted out of the North Haven High School. The request there is that we have enough interest, we have enough local interest that our boys want to swim for Guilford High School. They don't want to swim for a combined regionalized team. They want to be able to say that they're Grizzlies moving forward. They want to be able to represent their school and their town. And the request from that group of parents is saying, take the dollars that are currently being, because swimming in the cooperative is not without cost. Take the dollars that are currently being directed toward the cooperative. We know that it will cost additional dollars, but allow us to have a standalone Guilford boys swim team as we do a girls swim team. For both of those requests, this proposed budget is suggesting a $10,000 increase in spending. That money will be split across the 2 teams. It'll bring total spending up to about $15,000 in each of those areas. It would cover essentially all of the costs associated with coaching, transportation, and officials. It would not take away the need for parent contributions, particularly because of the expense associated with pool time. But it would reduce the parental expense for the girls team, and it would bring the boys team and the girls team into, you know, into an equal standing as local Guilford teams.
Thank you. Not only is that a great explanation, but you know, people aren't aware of the numbers. It's a modest number, and the expansion seems like a big deal. And of course, the timing is, you know, raises questions. But I think it's a lot easier to explain. Thank you.
And, you know, we understand that question about timing is really important, but we also think it's really important that this budget have some bright spots because of this timing. It's a difficult time for our high school kids, and if there's something that will support their social and emotional growth, if there's something that they can be enthusiastic about, then I think this budget needs to include some of those pieces as well because of the timing. I appreciate the question.
Well, as other people I see on the screen around me, you know, I hark back to the time when all sports were all paid by taxpayers. They weren't parent supported. And I think it's marvelous for development. But we just do need to explain these things. Thank you.
I have a couple.
All right, maybe I could pick another line item if it's okay and ask you a little bit about what's driving the increase.
I was going to ask if anybody who hasn't asked a question yet. Make sure everyone's got an opportunity. Veronica, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have several questions, but one of my first questions is under salaries for paraprofessionals. It's broken out by schools, but there's nothing there for Calvin Lee, and I wondered why.
Linda, I'm going to need to defer to you on that.
That is because the ones that are broken out are library or office paras. Wheat has paras that are under the special ed category, but they don't have a separate library or office para.
So Wheat paras are then lumped into pupil services, is that what you're saying?
All of the special education paras are under pupil services.
Okay.
That are listed, the one at the high school, one at Adams, one at Baldwin, are office or library paras, more library paras.
And then my other question is, there's a request for a vehicle. Is this an additional vehicle for facilities, or is this replacing a vehicle?
No, it's replacing a vehicle that is 10 years old and should have been replaced 5 years ago.
Like most town vehicles?
Yes.
We replaced one last year under a leasing, and it seems to be working well. We wanted to repeat that and get another one before it collapses beneath us.
Sounds a little like my vehicle.
When you said the age of the vehicle, though, just curious, real quick, you said it's a 10-year-old vehicle
that we use for local plowing. So this would be a plow truck with 10 years of plowing, salting, and sanding on it.
Okay, so it's got a lot of wear and tear on it.
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, they're the ones used by our maintenance people. They're the only ones that really have vehicles other than well, it was a van that was in the district probably before I came here, but we just replaced it with a former police vehicle.
Okay.
That is used more by dining services.
All of our vehicles are connected to the maintenance program, with the exception of that one that's used by the dining services for moving, you know, supplies or foodstuffs among the buildings. These are all maintenance vehicles, and they're all worked hard.
Question before we rotate back around: professional development. In your summary, you had indicated, you know, the continued, you know, embedded professional development, and I noticed that there was a decrease of about 11.5% on professional development. Just wondering what caused that decrease. Despite your summary saying, you know, it's continued embedded, is it that we're at a point where we've caught up and we don't need as much, or there were some savings? I see most of the savings is at the high school. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely not that we're doing less. It is that we've seen some of the contracts that have reduced. I think, Linda, particularly the IFL contract has come in lower this year. And then I believe well, go ahead, Linda, answer first and then I'll fill in.
So the high school specifically, it was
Oh,
in
it was the
year.
IB. It was the IB.
For the
I'm
IB,
sorry.
yes. So we had some new staff that needed IB training. So it was increased last year or in the current year's budget for the IB training, and we won't need to do that in the coming year.
Thank you.
We are absolutely not reducing the professional development. That IB training was one time required for some of the new administrative changes that were happening, and for some teachers that had retired, new teachers needed training. It's more similar to the AP training, but we're continuing with professional development this year, particularly focused around this blended learning environment, social and emotional wellness, and then again, that equity and social justice component that we mentioned. Those are all rich areas for professional learning this year and will continue to be next year as we move forward.
I don't think I understood the decrease in staffing. You said you lost 4 full-time positions. Were these all emergency positions?
No, there are teaching positions that are being reduced in response to the enrollment declines that we have mentioned. And those are specifically a math position. Currently at Adams, there are 6 teachers in the areas of English language arts, science, and social studies each. We carry a 7th teaching position in math. That was put in place back when we were shifting over to the Common Core state standards, and we had restructured the math sequence of classes. At this time, as we've moved students through that bubble, and then with the declining enrollment at Adams, there just isn't a reason to continue to overstaff in the math area. It'll leave math classes with exactly the same class sizes as English language arts, social studies, and science. There's additionally a reduction in a music position at Adams, and again, that is in response to declining enrollment at Adams. We made a not quite as large but similar reduction at Baldwin a number of years ago, and now that enrollment decline is catching up at Adams. It would right-size the music staffing at Adams. There are 2 classroom positions that are being eliminated at the elementary level, and again, those are directly in response to the enrollment declines that we're seeing there. This will in no way increase class sizes. At the same time, we're asking to add that social work position. We're asking to add that district-wide technology integration specialist position. We're adding some marginal pieces to the media specialist positions at 2 of our elementary schools to bring them from 80% to full-time. The actual net in staffing is a decrease of 1.2 full-time positions. There's a number of moves and repurposing that is happening, but it's a net decrease of 1.2 teaching positions in the district. There's also a net decrease in this budget of 2.5 paraprofessional positions. And that is over this year's budgeted allocation. It is not taking into account any of the additional COVID increases that we put into place, as those were never budgeted.
Dr. Friedman, for people that are leaving, are you able to put them into another position or maybe accomplish the reduction by attrition?
That's always our hope when you look at positions like the elementary classroom position. So again, we're looking at a reduction of 2 teaching positions in that area. One of them is already vacant. We never needed to fill that position this year, so we're taking one of those positions out. In the other case, we would need to see 1 retirement in order to be able to do that. Certified teaching positions, they account for almost 25% of our teaching staff. So it's not unusual to see a retirement in the elementary certification area that would offset that. You know, the difficulty, Jonathan, is that we prepare our budget in November, December, January, and we are not usually aware of retirements or other moves until May, June, and July. And so we build our budget in response to enrollment numbers and student needs that we see. We always then work with our staff, and we always hope to accomplish that through attrition or reassignment, whatever possible, but we don't wait for the staff members to make a decision before we decide where we staff. We budget for the students to meet their needs, and then we work with the personnel and assignment component on the back half.
Okay,
Question.
understood. I wonder if you're able to kind of put out some feelers and see if those retirements may materialize.
We always do.
How about the other two teachers, though? You're kind of referring to the, I think, the early education teachers. How about the, was it math and music, I believe, at Adams?
So similarly, that would apply to all of those areas. There are fewer math teachers. 7 through 12 certified math teachers is a smaller number. But again, so this is difficult to say, right? We're responsible fiscally to the community as well as being responsible to the students' instructional needs. We budget for the enrollment in front of us, and then we will do everything we can to support our people. But we will not make a difficult decision and avoid making an enrollment-driven reduction in staffing because we're worried about keeping somebody in a job. We make the budget decision first, and then we do everything we can to support our teachers, keep them in those positions. Or we work with reassignment, we work with attrition, and if necessary, we work really hard to help them land on their feet in another district. The experience, even our least experienced teachers, the experiences they gain in Guilford serve them well. Last year in this budget, we were talking about a reduction of 6 English language arts teaching positions at Adams. We knew that we were going to be unlikely to be able to absorb all of those 6 positions through attrition. To date, we know that we either found opportunities for those teachers in Guilford, or those teachers found other good jobs in other competitive districts because of their experiences in Guilford and the recommendations that they left here with, and the lobbying that I know their principals did to make sure that those folks landed on their feet. But you know, I just need to be clear. We make budget decisions based on enrollment and the needs of the students, and then we do everything we can to make sure that our people land on their feet and that our people have continued employment. But we don't wait for a retirement and then make a cut in that area. That's not going to be instructionally the right way to do that. We're going to end up with a hodgepodge of teachers in place rather than a system of teachers in place to support the needs of our children.
Okay.
Question
Understood.
about transportation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
About transportation, if I may.
Sure.
As the year progressed with the crisis we suffered through, there were more assumptions and indeed encouragement from the Board of Education for a kind of decline of use of buses and more parents assuming the burden of transporting their children directly. As I look at the budget for 2021, which was without assumptions of any cutbacks at all, you had a $2 million figure in there. You've increased that figure, even though we had savings in there, you've increased that figure modestly by about 2% for the coming year. My question is this: are you expecting any carryover from the private transportation of students by their families into the new year? Or are you assuming that it will be full-time transportation as was the case before the pandemic?
You know, I think that this pandemic has undone work in the area of transportation. We've worked really hard over the last 10 years to try to encourage families to have their students ride the bus, right? We have always tried to reduce parent pickup and drop off and encourage students to use the bus. This year, we've done the opposite. It's the first time in my career that I've encouraged people not to ride the bus. I do expect ridership to rebound if we move through this and if the vaccines get rolled out thoroughly. I don't think that it's going to rebound all the way back to 100%. But all of that said, Mr. Gammerman, the parental driving did not reduce the number of buses that we had out on the street. It reduced the density on those buses. It allowed the students to socially distance to a greater degree, but we've never been able to fully load our buses in Guilford, and that's one of the challenges that we've spent the last 4 or 5 years addressing in the start time task forces that we've pulled together. If we were to fully load our buses in Guilford, we would be creating bus runs that were pushing 90 minutes long. The controlling factor for us in Guilford is the geography and the length of the run. And so even if it didn't get back to full ridership, ridership isn't ridership isn't the factor that drives our scheduling. Coverage of the community and time of bus run is what drives our scheduling. And so, no, we don't anticipate that we would save money if more parents continued to drive their students next year. We'd still have to cover the whole community and bring everybody into school. The increase does assume that we're back to 5 days a week of schooling with bus services provided, and it assumes the annual contractual increase of the contract that we negotiated into. Remember, it's going to be year 3 of a 5-year contract that we're in with the bus provider. There's also special education transportation costs that are built into this budget as well.
If I could go to athletic supplies real quick. Talks about the rebranding with the new mascot, projecting an increase of 60,000. I know that there was actually a really good article in the paper, that summarized a lot of these items, but I know that there's fundraising intended. Is that 60,000 including the offset with fundraising, or is that before any kind of fundraising offset? What's the prediction on that?
No, that 60,000 is not our anticipated whole cost. In fact, it's probably closer to about 1/3 of what we anticipate the whole cost would be.
Right.
We're expecting to be able to offset that figure in 2 ways. One, we hope to be able to leverage enthusiasm and do some fundraising, both through the purchase of new Grizzly branded spiritware, but also simply through the direct request for contributions to the community. And then secondly, we know that some of this change will need to be phased in. We simply don't have the capacity to say that we're going to go out and re-uniform every team and repaint it, right? So we're hopeful that the fundraising will get us to a position that most or all of this can be achieved quickly. And if necessary, we will phase these changes in. Now, what I can say is that no Guilford sports team will take the field with a uniform that still says Indians on it, but there may be some holdover of a G with feathers on it until we are able to catch up with the expense and make those changes over time. So we'll prioritize the changes that need to happen. Anything that specifically says Indians will not be used again. That'll be the first tier of replacement. The ones where the feathered G is prominent will be the next tier. And if it's something where the G is rather small or subtle or sublimated, those may be worn for another season while we work on that change. As we talked about with athletics in general, there was a question at an early board meeting already about those parent contributions to athletics, and we've got a number of booster clubs that have traditionally funded assistant coaching positions across the district. That totals up to a little, right around $100,000 a year of community contributions to support those athletic programs. We know that the first turf field built in Guilford was done through community contributions. We know that the playgrounds at almost every one of our elementary schools was done through the support of our community members outside of the school budget. We know that this is an ask again, but we do count on our community and the people who encourage this change, to the people who this change is important and positive. We're going to create an opportunity for them to be able to support that change, again, by purchasing some Grizzly branded spiritware, but also by making direct contributions. And we think and hope that the community will step up again, as they always have for us in Guilford.
Okay.
Am I up?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask about the other contracted services. I'm sort of just diving in, as you know, but it seemed to lead to this Newsella as the driver. Can you tell us a little what the Newsella is? And
Yep, and I'll give my answer and then I'll defer to Dr. Crystal. Newsella is an online digital subscription periodical service. Newsella allows a third grade teacher to search a database for articles on any topic that would be relevant to her third graders, and find periodical publications that she could use. In fact, it's got other functions that allows the teacher to search not just by topic, but by readability level. So while that is a new service and an increase for us, there's also some offsetting reductions in the other direct purchase of periodicals. It allows students to have access to current reading materials, periodical materials in the classroom, but it gives teachers a wider reach and greater control rather than simply waiting to see what Time for Kids is going to write about this month and having to build an activity around what the editors at Time for Kids chose to publish this month. Dr. Crystal, how'd I do with that?
Yep, you did a great job. I mean, it is a searchable database. It ties into our curriculum based on the search. It allows students to be self-paced. Teachers can put articles in for kids to read. Kids can search on their own. And there is the ability of the teacher to lock the reading level if they want to teach at a certain level. And there's also the ability to adjust readability so that all students can have access to content regardless of their readiness level. So it provides a lot of functionality, and it combines and integrates content really effectively, and it allows teachers to provide additional resources to support the subjects that they're teaching.
is the price tag on that about $30,000? I'm trying to recall.
Linda?
Sorry, I was going to look in that section. How does that compare to just some other tools that might be available on the internet to research periodicals?
I think the big advantage of Newsella is the fact that it's all in one place, and teachers don't have to go hunting and searching all over the place for content that's related to their specific area that they teach. And it's very easily accessible to kids. It's secure. Teachers can construct lessons through it. They can push materials out through it. There are really not many other sources that allow you to do that in such an integrated fashion. And the price that we paid this year, which Linda can give you the exact figure, but it was based on us being a new customer, and we are piloting the entire package. So that price could easily come down a little bit for next year, depending on which aspects of the package we decide to keep and which we don't need anymore.
I think that the other thing that's important here is that while that cost has gone up, it's allowed us to pare back the amount we're spending on individual periodicals.
Right.
So if you look at the school level budgets, you'll see the periodical costs are down substantially this year.
It also, it's a district-wide subscription, so it's giving uniform materials to the classroom. So if the teacher instructs something, I'm guessing all the students are looking at the same sources. So the teacher doesn't have to jump from one kid reading Newsweek to another kid reading Time, and maybe there's a variation between what the stories are. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yep. It will give all teachers access to the same database. And again, it gives them greater reach and greater control. Yep.
Wanted to head, before I head over to site improvements and capital and bonding near the end of the binder. Anybody else have anything else?
I had one quick question.
Jeff, go ahead.
There's a half-time position for a district-wide grounds maintainer. Are there certain areas where you could see that person performing their tasks? Is it?
Yeah, Linda, I believe that position was built into the budget this year.
It was a half a position, I think.
Yeah, no, that was in the current year's budget. We're not asking for any increase for custodial staff or more ground staff.
My apologies. My
Yeah,
apologies.
Budget.
but you're right. This year we went from 1 to 1.5, and we're staying at the 1.5 moving forward to next year.
Okay.
Okay.
I got a question about the water use at Adams. It was a curiosity thing. I ended up on that particular page, and it seemed like all the schools had like a sort of a steady cost for water, but Adams had kind of a significant increase, about 10,000, I think, for the up and coming.
That's because Adams has a new irrigation system on fields that it never had before. And so we pay for the irrigation of the fields.
Okay.
What about supplies? I see that Adams this year went down 13%, and that was more so than any other school in the district.
Again, that's going to be almost entirely enrollment connected. Adams had the single largest decline as an individual location. Over the last 4 years, Adams has declined about 120 students. That's between 25 and 30% of the overall population. So a lot of that is directly related to that decline.
I see.
Mr.
Can I
Chairman,
throw it?
oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I was just going to note, perhaps obvious, but we have been watching for many years. It obviously started in first grade, then moved to second grade, literally a march through the grades of a significant dip that is now between the 8th and 9th grades. So we've actually kind of been able to predict when it was going to hit each school. So that the declining enrollment, well, obviously there's some movement in and out of the district at different grades, really happened approximately 9 years ago, with an entering kindergarten and first grade classes. So again, it's something we've been able to watch, and we know where it's headed.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I got another one to throw out there. I noticed that some costs for abatement management went up. Did we find some new problems at one of the schools? I didn't really dive into the details yet. Does that ring a bell? Abatement
Yes,
management?
but Linda, are you?
It does. I just want to get the exact, so just give me 1 second. It's for a specific project. Let me just find the page here.
Yep, that makes sense. Start taking something apart and we find something.
While Linda's looking, no, it doesn't mean that we found problems. We are not addressing a problem. It's that we have specific projects coming up, and those projects, because of the age of the buildings in which they're being done, will require abatement to be part of the project. It's proactive and preventative. It is not reactive.
Are we anticipating any drop in the excess cost grant support that we get from the state?
So
yes, this budget is built on an estimate.
I like an answer.
I was going to give a longer answer, but Linda answered it.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, was the answer.
Linda, you cut off. What was the rest of your sentence?
For the excess cost?
Yeah, I didn't hear the rest of it. You said yes, and then you said something. I didn't hear what else.
This budget is based on an estimate that we would receive 67%.
Okay.
Where the current year's budget is based on an estimate of 69%.
Thank you.
Okay.
What about bonding projects from the state? Or am I skipping ahead? Sorry, Chairman.
The clock is skipping ahead. The bond is at the bonding.
No, we're okay. Do you want to touch on the bonded projects, or?
No, I'm happy to speak to the bonded projects. So we also anticipate bringing forward a bond request for 6.2 million, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. So of that 6.2 million, 2.9 million of that is the Lakes HVAC bond request, which we all know was deferred from last year. So while we know that 6.2 is a significant request, essentially half of it was deferred from what was planned to be done last year. Last year we had, last year during budget time, we were planning on requesting bonds for the Baldwin HVAC and for the Lakes HVAC. Because of complications related to the executive orders and the referendum, we deferred that Lakes request. So the first essentially 3 million of that 6 million is to do the Lakes project, and all of you here know that that's a needed project. And if you look carefully, if you compare to your notes from last year, you will see that that cost has increased from last year because we've added some boilers and some other concerns to that request. Additionally, there's a request for approximately 2.1 million around the stadium field. Now that's the original turf field in the district. The complete request would include recarpeting the field. There's an option to replace the shock pad and replace the fill in that field. It also includes significant upgrades, replacement to the surrounding track, which is failing at this time, and some other upgrades to ancillary facilities like the sound booth, the announcer's booth. While that is a $2.1 million request, and while we're carrying it on our side, I just want to make clear that fields are a shared responsibility and a shared expense with the town. And so we view that as a request on behalf of the school district, but also the town, and specifically Park and Rec and athletic programs who use that field extensively as well. And then there are some additional smaller items. There is a boiler replacement at Cox for $414,000. Those boilers are beyond their life cycle and need to be replaced. And then there's an elevator project at Melissa Jones for $552,000. That elevator is beyond its usable life. We can only find parts for that on eBay at this time. It's not being supported. We need to replace that before it fails and leaves us without elevator service. And we need to get something in there similar to the project we did at Adams a couple years ago. So those items together, along with the architectural and engineering fees that we've been building in, would be a request for $6,203,773 of bonding expense.
Two quick points on that. One, I noticed, we noticed, I'm sure we'll just mention it tonight, Standing Building Committee reduced the amount of the contingency on the elevator upgrades. I guess they voted to literally cut it in half based on the information they had. So that's good news, because it means that elevator project looks like it'll probably drop below $500,000, just on what the building committee said on January 5th. Now, it's ultimately not up to us, but I noticed that was good news. And the other item was, and I don't know, again, I didn't have my binder in front of me, but from last year, we have the bonding estimate for 2021 projects, and I know these are all important projects, so don't misconstrue what I'm about to say, but what are the, what's the next 4 to 5 years look of this? Yeah, 6.2 is a big number. We understand why. Of course, there's always the perception of the public and what's in that 6.2. So I guess the question ends up being, what do we see, hypothetically? I don't recall what the projections are for the next 3 to 5 years from the school side, but are we going to be looking at 6.2, 10 million, 3 million, 2 million? What are we looking at so that we can at least say that, yeah, this might be a larger year, but next year's 3 million, or what's the projection, and can we get some information on that if it's I know it's missing, but I don't know if we have that or not.
I think we do. I'd rather not do it off the cuff tonight, but we can talk to Mr. Gurnham.
Right.
We can pull what the calendar is, and we can have those we can project that out for you the next time we all talk.
I tend to remember that is the case, that we usually get it, and I just didn't see it in here, and I'm sure you have it. Jason, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to dovetail what Paul had said, just a reminder to the board that we are having another facility needs assessment conducted, and we should have that report back relatively soon, which would speak to what the needs would be in the next several years.
Great.
We were
Yeah,
working, we were working with a 10-year plan. We can certainly show you what we're projecting for next year, the year after, but the new needs assessment will help us to then push out another 10-year plan.
That's a good point, because I know we've been hearing that there would be a meeting with the three boards in terms of what that would look like, but we haven't heard anything yet. But that's for another meeting, not this one necessarily yet.
And actually, Mr. Ailes, if I could, I know we jumped over to bonding. You had mentioned site improvement. I do
Yes.
want to mention site improvements is one of the areas where the word conservative again applies. There is an increase in site improvement this year, but it's minimal. I believe it's $12,000. We're not going backwards, but we're certainly not making those investments. You know, a few years ago, there was some encouragement, I think, both within the Board of Ed and from the Board of Finance to try to get to that 1% figure, right? We are not sitting at 1% of the budget for site improvements this year. We do feel that we've done a really good job with preventative maintenance, with getting in front of things. This year is a step forward, but it's a really small step forward. It's not a significant increase. Again, it's not going backwards, but if we were coming forward with a less conservative approach, you would have seen an increase that would have brought that line item closer to $600,000 rather than the minimal increase in the level that you see that line at tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate that summary. I did highlight a couple of things on my list, and the number one thing I was going to say is that the last thing I would want to see is the number go down on capital, especially when that's always the place that if there's a need to go, that's where it goes. So let's not do it yet in terms of make even is one thing, but even isn't isn't good, because it's just compounding the issue. The questions I had though on the site improvements, and I think I know the answer to most of these, but the replaced flooring tiles in the cafeteria of Guilford High School, I'm sure, it's only $8,000, but, I know that there's questions always that, well, Guilford High School is brand new. And just a reminder, it ain't brand new anymore. And I know there's wear and tear, and we see things all the time on roof, repairs and just typical maintenance items. So I'm assuming that the flooring tiles in the cafeteria are due to wear and tear. Not due to faulty building and warranty. That's an assumption. Am I correct in my assumption that it's wear and tear?
Yes, if it were faulty, or if there was fault that lay somewhere else, we would have pursued that and had it corrected. But you're right, that commons area gets some of the hardest use of anywhere in that building, and the idea that something heavy would be dropped and that a tile would be cracked is of no surprise to anyone. Mr. Gurnham could certainly give a fuller answer, but yes, it is general wear and tear and maintenance and upkeep. It's not a faulty design or faulty materials. We would have pursued that.
Right. There's another 60 combined at the high school for construction of acoustical containment. I'm assuming that is Long Hill Farms and the amount of sound that still continues to penetrate that residential area that has been a concern ever since it was built. So I'm assuming that's to try to take care of that.
Yes, and we had some extensive conversation about that at our operations committee meeting last week. It has to do with the ice making that happens overnight, with the TecoGen system, as well as with the emergency generator, all of which are housed on that side of the building and directly abut our neighbors at Long Hill Farm. We've been working on that for years to try to be good neighbors and address those concerns.
And I would only point out on the repairs, this again is a reminder to many of us, at least on the Board of Finance, that the septic fields and the retaining ponds were never repaired or replaced during the construction of the high school. It was literally, the big issue was that we didn't have to increase it.
Yes.
And that was a major hurdle that we got through deep. But it was always understood that there was going to need to be repairs of the septic fields and retaining ponds that are existing.
Our new school is built on the old septic system. That's correct.
Right, and we knew this was coming down. So
yes.
Before anybody asked that question, it's not that it was ignored. It was just didn't have to be expanded or doubled in size, which would have been a huge expense. The only other, there's a couple of other smaller items here. the district food storage and distribution center for dining services at 100. Could you just give a summary of what that project is specifically at Adams?
Again, I'll defer to Linda on that one.
I tend to remember it from last year maybe, but.
Right, it is a carryover from last year. It's to create a central storage facility and give us a place where we could purchase out of a central location and then move the food out instead of everybody buying and stockpiling their own. It would help us control our inventory. It would give us a better storage facility, better freezer facility. We also run into issues like at the end of the year, moving stuff into one location, or if we have a power outage extended period of a time, this would have a better freezer space to combine things and help us store and maintain our food and our inventory.
Okay. My last one on this, and then I'll open it up again. I know we only have a few minutes, but the repaired gym floor from water damage at Jones. When did that happen? The water damage. What was the cause of that caused the damage? And is it repaired so that we don't have to repair it again?
I'd have to check with Mr. Gurnham. I apologize, Linda. Unless you or Jason, unless you remember off the top of your head, I'd have to check with Cliff.
I don't remember specifics on that one, sorry.
Okay.
I had a question.
Are there any contract negotiations in play that would impact the proposed increase in salaries?
Yes, we have, well, 2 of them that would affect this budget. Dining services doesn't affect this budget. So there are 2 contracts that'll be negotiated at the end of this year.
The budget was built to reflect what we expect those will land at. So obviously it's not a specific figure, but we believe it's a reasonable figure.
And then I was curious, as far as like the new hires, was there some kind of outcry that was sort of driving these decisions to have new hires?
I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Trotter.
Typically I've made it to some of your pre-budget meetings, and I see the public kind of outcry, and they want something, like I've seen definitely an outcry for more athletics and art. And I was just curious if it was sort of an outcry saying, oh, we want a psychologist, or we want sign language, or.
Got it. So the request for the additional social work support has come directly from the leadership team, from Mr. Scanziano and from Mrs. Chaff at the high school, recognizing the needs that their students are presenting. The request for sign language has come again from the high school, looking to provide a different option for a world language that would meet that world language requirement and offer a little variation to what we've been offering before. The art increase, while there's not a staffing cost associated with that, I did say that there is a cost associated with that, and that will be reducing in another area. That one specifically has been about 3 years of community and parental requests coming to board meetings, talking about the importance and the value of art contact time and lobbying for an increase in that. We ended up again, when you look at the conservative nature of this budget, not simply adding something on, but reassigning resources from another area to that request. The minimal increases that you see around the media center coverage at 2 of our elementary schools are around recognizing the continued work that those individuals are doing. Media specialists at the elementary levels both teach directly to students and support teachers in their classrooms. And there's going to be a continued sort of need for that additional support as we move out of this year and into next year. Additionally, there's been some conversations at the board and district level about building out the idea of maker spaces at the media centers, and this would be a proactive move to support the impact that those additional centers would have on the expectations of the media specialists. and then the district-wide technology integration specialist. That is the only additional unbudgeted position that we've put in this year that we are carrying over into next year's budget, despite the fact that we will come out of this pandemic at some point, hopefully in the very near future. The additional demand on teachers as a result of technology, blended learning, platforms like these, that's not going to go away. All of our teachers jumped into that technological world with 2 feet over a weekend back in March last year. They're going to need to continue to have that support. And we've got 2 now with this one. We will have 2 those technology support positions servicing approximately 350 teachers. Again, we could use more of those, but it's a step in the right direction. So it's a combination, Jonathan, of requests that have been made from parents and community members, needs that have been identified by the principals and the leadership team as they look at their schools, and just looking at how we move out of this year into next year.
We have
And again, I just want to note, again, I know that you characterize that as increases, but I do want to note that the net of teaching positions this year is a decrease of 1.2 positions. It's not an increase in teaching positions. So, right, we are reassigning resources and reducing resources. We are not increasing teacher resources in this budget.
We have about 5.
You know, it's interesting. We see this.
We have about 5 minutes. I'm just letting you know. We have to transition over. So
see enrollment decline, you know, and we do see occasionally that that teachers need to decline as well, but then they always seem to be offset with some new hiring. So we never experience any overall savings.
Well, so, you know, again, we make really difficult decisions. Last year, we eliminated 6 English language arts positions. This year, we're looking at math and music. But again, you hear it everywhere. Schools are being asked to do more. And in this year specifically, when teachers have been asked to support kids learning from home, learning in their classroom, juggling the health protocols as well as the instructional demands. And next year, don't forget, is going to be a rebuilding year. Right, I've been using the analogy all along that next year is after the hurricane has cleared out. I could make an argument that this budget should be a 3%, 4%, or 5% increase because we need to build back from the impact that this pandemic has had upon us. So, you know, as we've seen enrollment decrease, we have used those maybe direct classroom resources to provide additional special ed programming that has helped us to decrease outplacements in the district. We've provided additional mental health, social and emotional support positions that we see across the nation more students and younger students are requiring. And this year specifically, we're responding to the needs that our kids are going to have as they come out of this pandemic, instructional and social and emotional needs moving forward. So absolutely, we recognize that enrollment is declining faster than our staffing is declining, but that's because expectations are increasing faster than enrollment is declining.
Okay. Thank you.
Those expectations are coming from the senior management.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, I'm trying. Mr. Beatty, ask your question, please.
Thank you. Back to site improvements for a minute. One of the items is the upgrades to the north parking lot, phase 2 for parental pickup. Is there anything that you've experienced over this past year? I mean, I know the Adams pickup and drop off is problematic for a variety of reasons, but have there been any lessons learned over the past year with the increase in parental drop-off? And I know the traffic cones and the new flow that's going to impact this $80,000 line item, or is going to result in a refiguring of what you're planning to do with that site?
No. So we've learned a lot, and we know that the crossing guard is essential, that we can't let that position go. We know that the new driveway will help and will facilitate that. But this year we've been dealing with an Adams schedule that only has half of the students reporting to school on any given day. And so next year, when we come back, and hopefully before next year, but when we come back to fully enrolled days at Adams in the high school, as we've done at all the other schools, we do expect that, you know, especially while we have increased parental pickup and drop off, this will be an improvement, but it's going to continue to be a challenge at that location.
Okay, Great, thanks.
And just to answer Jonathan's last question, yes, to some degree, those increased expectations of schools are coming from senior management, but more broadly, they're coming from society in general. Everybody expects the public schools not just to be reading, writing, and arithmetic, but to be supporting students' social and emotional wellness and covering a waterfront of concerns that were not the purview of public schools 50, 30, 20, 10 years ago. Our schools are responding to that in an exemplary fashion. I'm absolutely proud of what we've done with our resources. Again, I'll sort of finish, Mr. Ailes, I know we're wrapping up. This is a 1.49% increase that we're bringing forward from the leadership team. It is the most conservative budget that I have ever brought forward. On the heels of the pandemic, we're suggesting a 1.2 reduction in our teaching staff. I could certainly argue that this needs to be a 3, 4, 5% increase to meet the needs that this pandemic has laid on the school system. I'm not just proud of what we've done this year, Mr. Trotta, I'm proud of what we've done 10 years together here in Guilford. We're meeting the needs of our students, and we're doing it in all of these increasing areas of demand. And we're not creating that demand, we're responding to that demand.
You think with the drag of the pandemic that our residents are going to be struggling economically?
That's exactly why we're bringing in a 1.49% budget, the most conservative budget that has ever come from the leadership team to the Board of Education. It's why you see those responses to enrollment, right? We are trying to balance a budget that recognizes the import of the medical, educational, and financial emergency that we have just come from. And we believe that what we've done does that. Going backwards, if we brought in a budget that had a 2% decrease here, that might be responsive to the financial emergency, but it would be educational malpractice in the situation that we find ourselves in, right? We're coming in at what we think balances, right? I think that we're landing right in the middle of that nexus. This was a medical emergency, it's an educational emergency, and it's a financial emergency. I think this budget is responsive to all three of those. Right? We could respond to any one and ignore the other two. We're trying to respond to all three.
The economic circumstances really justify new hiring?
Mr. Trotta, we're reducing our teaching staff by 1.2 FTEs in this budget. It is a net decrease in teacher bodies walking into our classrooms. It is not new hiring. We are repurposing existing resources and reducing in the deal. This is not new hiring. This is not an increase in teaching positions.
But without new hiring, you'd have a decrease of 4 positions.
Jonathan, I'm going to cut it off now. All right. We got 2 minutes to go. We have plenty of time. This is a superintendent's budget. We've heard plenty. The Board of Education the members are going to do their due diligence, and they're going to come through. They're going to present next month. At this point, we do have to go to our next meeting. So we have plenty of time to discuss all this and have conversation, but we do need to go. Dr. Freeman, Board of Education members, Mr. Sands, thank you very much. We all appreciate this time. We have for all the years I've been doing this, the give and take that we have.
We really appreciate all of you. Thank you for the time and for the thoughtful questions.
Yes.
Could I get a motion to
Go
adjourn?
ahead.
I'd make it, but I'm not allowed to.
Okay.
So moved.
All right. Second by Mr. Della Ventura. All in favor?
1 second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ken, go.
Thank you all very much.
I wanted to take 1 minute to congratulate Dr. Freeman on his award this year. You made us all very proud of the town.
Thank you very much, Ken. That's very much appreciated.
Here, here.
Thanks all. Okay.
Now,
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
Next meeting.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks.